Welcome everyone to our panel on the EU AI Act. My name is Michelle and I lead the AI risk governance and ethics offering in Deloitte in the UK. I'll be moderating today and we have an exciting group of panelists here for the next half hour. So let's jump right in. Let's start with Torsten. Could you tell us about the scope of the EU AI Act and in particular, what should business leaders be aware of regarding the new requirements?
Yeah, to give a short introduction. So the EU AI Act was originally initiated to foster secure and trustworthy use of AI in Europe. And for this, the EU decided to make a risk-based approach on the regulation of AI systems. So not all AI systems will fall under the EU AI Act. So they make a classification, which is, I think it's a quite pragmatic approach on this. And especially the Act will focus on high-risk applications. So as a rule of thumb, every system that have an impact on the health, safety, or fundamental rights of citizens within the EU. And for these, they outline regulations that have to be fulfilled, coming up from a quality management system, risk assessment, risk management system, which will impact then the monitoring and how to put the systems on the market. So this is the good news that it's really focused on the high-risk systems and will provide guardrails what to have to fulfill by the companies and how the companies have to act on this.
Great. And Guillaume, overall, do you see the EU AI Act as an accelerator or an obstacle to AI development in Europe? And this kind of ties back to a lot of what was discussed in the previous panel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michelle. Very happy to be with you today. Thank you very much for the invitation. So I would say, well, there are two sides of this question. The first one is on the developer side. I think it's very useful to have a trustworthy framework for the development and the deployment of AI technology. Because if I were the one that was developing the AI system, I would be willing to have this regulatory framework in order to be able to demonstrate to the judge, for example, in case of an accident, that I have done my best to make sure that my AI is safe, and because we know this AI system are not zero risk. You can always have an accident, even if the progress that is provided by this AI system is very, very interesting, and we are encouraging it. There is, in case of accident, you want to be able to say to the judge that you have implemented the metrics, the evaluation protocol, the testing environment, you have analyzed the bias associated with the processing of your AI system. So that is the first reason why I think it's very important to have this trustworthy regulatory framework. Also, it's a very good opportunity for the developer of AI system to have guidelines in order to know for the different kind of AI application, the metrics that are used, and the ones that are recognized by the market, in order to be able to implement as fast as possible these guidelines, these methodologies. And on the end user side, if we want if we want to have a commercial success for AI, if we want the demand to get closer to the offer on AI, and be able to commercialize this AI system, you need acceptability. You need trustworthiness. So that's what the end user will be willing, if they want to buy another autonomous car, for example. I mean, who is going to use such car if it's not qualified, if it's not characterized, if it's not evaluated, and if we are not sure it's safe enough to get the CE marking? So in order really to have a commercial success for AI, I think the AI Act is an accelerator, Michelle.
Yeah, really interesting. So I guess building on that for Torsten, do you think the cost of the compliance would be high, and would that lead to a competitive disadvantage for European companies? Or do you also kind of see it as more of an accelerator?
Yeah, cost of compliance are always, I have to say, it should be seen as an investment. So you have to put compliance in place, you have to put in governance in place, also then to ensure that you make your developments with perspective for the future on a solid base. So each company should have this already in place for software development in a way to ensure that these are value also in the future. So it's an investment, sure, but you will get the return on investment out of it if by ensuring security on your systems, that they are work as they intended to be, and that you also can make the progress on the systems in a regular environment. So this is nothing, I think that it's especially a result of the UAI Act, that you have put a quality management system in place for software development. I think this should be clear for most of the companies. So it's an investment on it, but I think it's a valid investment also to manage the risks that can be rising and also then ensure security of your systems.
Yeah, and Guillaume, you lead the national AI strategy for France. And so from a governmental point of view, what do you see as the comparative benefits of the EU AI Act? And does all of it outweigh the potential compliance costs and the risks?
So first, I totally agree with what Thorsten said. So most of the developers of AI system already have a process in their company to be sure. I mean, to make progress in their R&D effort. So they have to measure the performances of their system until they deploy it on the market. So it's not that you have to restart everything from scratch when you are going for the CE marking. You are supposed to already have all these processes set up, and then you have this final approval to be sure that you are able to commercialize your technology. And as I was saying, we are talking about high risk use of AI with the AI Act. So there will be no commercial success. There will be no commercial opportunities for these developers if they are not able to demonstrate to their end users, their customers, that indeed their technology is safe. So in fact, the benefits, it's more than just talking about benefit. We can just say, if we do not have this conformity assessment, there will be no commercial activities associated with this high-risk AI system. And it's not something new. It's not just about AI. It has been the case for any new product and technologies that were concerned by that was used for this high-risk application. So I think the benefit is very important. It's very important that European stakeholders move as fast as possible in this direction of being able to develop trustworthy AI system. And it's a hot topic. You have seen the discussion about generative AI, general purpose AI, and all the uncertainties associated with the personal data that are processed by this system. Also the potential bias associated with the processing of this system. So everybody recognizes that the performance of this generative AI system is very impressive. It's very promising in order to be able to automatize administrative or a production task in our company, in our administration, public administration. So it has a very positive output if we are able to set up this trustworthy framework. So yeah, huge benefit.
Yeah, great. And now just bringing Johan in, thanks for joining us. And your experience has been mostly in technology stack to enable trustworthy and explainable AI. So from a practical point of view, could you tell us about what organizations could be doing from a technical standpoint to build trustworthy AI and to validate their AI systems?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle, for the invitation. Yeah, I believe there is a huge motivation for enterprises, not only motivated by the act to invest more in the explainable, trustworthy infrastructure. I call it infrastructure because building a trustworthy AI system has several components, right? You need processes in place, you need a governance structure, but also you need technological infrastructure that allows you to build models at scale that fulfill the requirements of a trustworthy AI system. And here, for example, one component is accelerated computing. Also, advanced data logistics is needed here, and several other components, hardware, software, which you need to set up such a system. And that's not only for producing trustworthy AI models, but also to validate them. Maybe I could imagine that, especially in Europe, we will get a huge industry around testing, inspection, certification of these models by third parties, because not all banks have own validation systems, for example, so they need to work with third-party service companies in this respect. And those would also need an infrastructure, in technical terms, to manage the amount of models, the data, and to validate and test. So just to give you some example of how an accelerated computing platform, for example, would elevate or amplify such a building trustworthy AI systems. One of the examples is explainability. So if you want to use, for example, Shapley values, a post hoc explanation technology, like an entry-level way to do that, it's very time-consuming. It's very compute-intense. Imagine there's a bank that has a high-risk AI application, namely credit scoring, which is explicitly mentioned in the AI Act, and they want to get their black box model explained in a post hoc fashion. And they have 10 million customers. This would take several days, maybe, if you have an infrastructure that is not suited for the job. If you use an accelerated platform, you get it in a few minutes. So that means you can train a new model or use the model you already have, right, based on the explainability information. So that's just one example. Also, maybe you want to generate synthetic data to make stress tests, to see the robustness of the model. Also here you need an infrastructure to generate and train models that would give you synthetic data to test on, to amplify the original data set, right? A third example would be like training hundreds of models instead of only one, because 100 models would give you the opportunity to select the best model in terms of trustworthiness, explainability, transparency already. So it gives you a much better opportunity to find the best model configuration. And handling hundreds of models at the same time, training them, you need an accelerated computing stack with software and hardware in place. So just to give some example, and also those models, they change over time if they are learning by new fresh data. So you need a repeated check of the models and also a system that amplifies the auditor. So I could imagine there will be much more automation in these validation or support of technical support of validation in the future, where such accelerated software compute systems would support that.
Mm-hmm. And do you have examples of which communities and partners you're working with in building these out? Any kind of real world examples you could provide?
Absolutely. So what we currently observe is a huge ecosystem around so-called ethical AI startups, both in the US and Europe. So a lot of startups that we work with in NVIDIA, for example, startups that focus on new measures of bias or fairness, or they can help to explain the models with technologies, with different explainers, because there are many explanation methodologies out there, right? But we also work very close with AI Studio by Deloitte, with David Thogmartin. We already had seen in another session on the wildfire model. So he's also very engaged in the trustworthy AI model auditing and validation, beside other colleagues, of course, in Deloitte. And we currently accelerate some applications inside AI Studio, is explicitly a measure on explainability. So that's the same story that I told in the beginning about the Shapley values. So this is an advanced Shapley approach accounting for correlated signals and features. And this, again, is very time-consuming, compute-intense, so you need an accelerator here. Also, when I finished one of these EU projects where I was a board member, where we analyzed the risks of AI in financial services, I continued that project in Gaia X. So we started an own project in 2020 already on sort of an ecosystem approach to building tools to check models to make them more explainable. So this would potentially reduce the cost also for smaller companies to get access to such tools that would measure and test the compliance of these models. So that project is called Financial AI Cluster in the Finance and Insurance Data Space in GaiaX.
Cool. Yeah. So in the UK, we have been working with a lot of organizations across industry in preparing their controls framework and ensuring it is fit for purpose for AI. And I was wondering if, Torsten, you could give examples from Germany on how organizations are either preparing for these regulations or putting in place the kinds of controls and governance around their AI systems at the moment.
Yeah, first, it sounds very simple, but to get an overview what is happening in your organization. So first challenge is what use cases, what AI systems you are already developing and having in place and algorithms. So this can be quite challenging, especially for larger organizations. Then put a risk classification on these. So to see, okay, do you have some AI use cases that you are doing that will fall maybe under the scope of the EU AI Act? And then we see where we are coming from. In the past, there were some specialized machine learning, developing data analytics teams that are developing AI systems for the companies. And most of them without really an AI governance at the moment. So this is currently where we are to set up a working effective AI governance, put risk assessment in place, this AI inventory, risk classification in place, and then also put it in your risk management process to see, okay, what risk can arise from your AI system if you really use it in production, and becoming more and more to use the systems in production. And also the top management, sometimes it's really not aware what's going on a working level in some areas. And this is really something that is really important and needs to be emphasized. And then from this point on, supporting to see, okay, how I can make my organization, let me say, EU AI Act ready. So do I fulfill these requirements? Do I have really a quality management system already in place? Or what do I have to improve on my current development policies, for example, change policies, data governance policies, model evaluation, KPIs, so everything to see, do I need to update it and in which way? And this is, I think, a step which most of the companies have not yet started really. But looking at the time frame of the EU AI Act, it's now a little bit time to start with it. So we are assuming that the EU AI Act will be enacted in the beginning of 2024. And then currently it's in discussion having a 24 to 36 months period to the companies to fulfill with the requirements for these high-risk systems in a way. So if you are doing now the developing on these systems, you want to have them future-proof, and then it's really important to see what you have to implement now, for example, for logging functionalities. Jochen mentioned explainable AI functionalities. You have to say, okay, which balance you will find between performance of your model and the explainability of the model. So this is really something that have to be considered now, and you should really now act on this.
Great. So we're getting a couple of questions in the chat about ChatGPT and generative AI, which is such a hot topic now. And we've heard that regulators are considering what kind of these general purpose AI systems would mean for the future of EU AI Act and regulation. So maybe we'll start with Guillaume, and then others feel free to jump in. Like, what do you think will be the impacts on the EU AI Act?
Thank you for the question. So I think for the moment, the discussion is about designing a minimum requirement for this general purpose AI. In particular, at the moment, we consider that the minimum requirement would be to have, transparency regarding the training data set that would be used in order to train this general purpose AI. Also also making sure that bias analysis analysis of the influence factors has been done before the deployment of this AI technology, in order to be sure that we will have no toxic information, discrimination, and so on associated with the processing of this data. And And the last point is, and I think it's also very important regarding all the discussion about the deep fakes associated with generated by these AI systems. There is a the requirement about providing enough information to the end users so that the end users know that he or she is using an AI system, interacting with an AI system. So it will be probably mandatory. It will be a requirement. And so we think it's a very important. There is no constraint about the means to do that, and maybe standards are going to be used to help the AI developers to do that. But at least we have this minimum requirements. So yeah, and then just to finish my answer, there is this decision about having implementation act after the making the AI Act operating in order to continue designing this new requirement associated with general purpose AI.
Yeah, and maybe one thing to add, even with general purpose AI or ChatGPT and GPT models, the risk-based approach of the EU AI Act is still in place. So if you are using a foundation model and build a fine-tuned customized model, maybe for medical diagnostic, then you fall in this then again under this high-risk categorization. So in general, so if you use ChatGPT for just generating, let me say, marketing content or so on, you will not fall under this high risk. So that we have this minimum requirements coming out from the EU AI Act to see, okay, on which basis the foundation model was trained and so on, but you will not have the strict regulations like you have on a high risk use case. But if you use it for these high risk use cases, then you fall under this, and this and because of this, the EU AI Act put an extra section inside that also enforce the providers of these foundation models to make a little bit more transparency in the models and to work together then with the users in a way.
Yeah, really interesting. And since we're talking about kind of high risk use cases, there has been the controversial letter demanding a 6-month moratorium in AI training beyond GPT-4. Italy has banned ChatGPT over privacy concerns, but are reconsidering this position. Guillaume, what are your thoughts on the potential applications in high risk or extremely high risk applications, and what should be what are your thoughts on the government's approach to this?
So the French government opinion about that is that, of course, we understand the question that is legitimate. The question that has been asked by this letter, Future of Life letter. But still, in Europe, we have been thinking about designing this trustworthy framework for the development and deployment of AI since many years. So we are not starting it at the moment of ChatGPT. We have been doing that with, for example, the testing and experimentation facilities for AI that has been funded by the Digital Europe program, with the AI Act, with the AI Convention, with also many different voluntary conformity assessment scheme and labels that have been developed in Europe, and maybe most of them have been developed in Europe at the moment. So Europe has been considering this question of trustworthiness and safety associated with the use of this AI system since we launched our different national strategies on AI 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So in our opinion, it's out of question to stop the development of AI system. On the contrary, we want to accelerate, because the potential progress that is provided by AI system is huge for our well-being, for the competitiveness of our companies. But of course, we have to make sure that the use of this AI system is done, in a trustworthy environment. And right now, at the moment in Europe, many people are working on the harmonized standards that are going to be used in order to do the conformity assessment to the AI Act. So it's an ongoing work at the moment to define these metrics, evaluation protocol, and so on. So no reason to stop what we are doing as we are taking the two questions, the question of performance and the question of trustworthiness at the same level, and progressing on these two aspects at the same time.
Okay, well, from, I guess, back to a bit more of a technical point of view, Johan, there are frameworks and services out there to help organizations build and customize and deploy large language models and generative AI. Could you tell us a bit about how this can help with ensuring the governance and controls are in place for AI systems?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really the basis for building such, let's call them trustworthy large language models, is to be able to customize them. NVIDIA recently announced new services and tools around that called AI foundation models. So it's now possible to use pre-trained models, foundation models actually, on premise. So people in diverse enterprises from small to large could start with a foundation model, which is IP cleared, and then would be able to fine-tune that model with their own proprietary corporate data. And then once you have done that, you could use additional tools from our NEMO framework, for example, that would help to build guardrails around that, meaning that the application is only communicating in a certain domain, and once the user goes outside the domain, there's no response, right? We have seen that other applications, they create responses on every question, right? And also a very important step here is to build these information retrieval applications, which means that you can connect the large language model that you have trained to your own corporate information data. So you get the sources, right? You get the sources of documents. And that's really a big step. When you ask the system for certain things, you get basically the foundation texts and elements back, so you can validate and check. That's really important. Also, you can leverage accelerated computing once again here to analyze or classify bias and also a toxic language, right? So, so just to give you some examples of what can be done in a world where you can build and customize large language models. We started this a very long time ago. Actually, ChatGPT and other corporations and applications are our customers. So we are known how to, or we are used to leverage huge infrastructures to train those models and also to infer them. And now it's possible in terms of democratization, trustworthy large language models for corporations to do that on-prem with customized data, right? And here it's important to also maybe find the right balance between which size of the model you need, which accuracy you need, which trustworthiness levels you want to achieve, and also which latency you have, because that's also the inferencing part of language models is quite also compute intense, and also it depends on the task that you want to do. Is it a text summarization? Is it a Q&A system? It depends. And then the outcome is different in terms of compute requirements. So now you have the choice as a corporation, right, to really identify the right model setup and workflow for you, and how to really leverage the data that you have on-prem. So we see companies like Bloomberg, Morningstar, and so forth build their own GPT models with their own internal data. And also many insurance companies that we discuss with them, and banks are now considering to build their in-house large language models. I think that's really a very powerful thing. It's much bigger than services that are out there, because you have the customization capabilities, and with this you have the chance to build them in a more trustworthy sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are out of time. So just to wrap up, I think the panelists were mostly positive over the potential implications of the EU AI Act as a framework to help govern AI so that the organizations can accelerate innovation with the confidence in its safety and reliability and trustworthiness. Obviously, it's still to be finalized, and we'll have to see how it will be applied in practice. But well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today, and I'll pass it back to the moderator.